wanted to mention a few things. There are a few topics that we didn't cover. Particularly, I didn't cover work on CWL, and partly because I didn't expect us to use it, and it's sort of a next level to Nextflow, in a sense, much more difficult to describe, although that has increasingly become easier, particularly with workflows like SnakeMake and Galaxy that can actually emit CWL. But it's sort of the next level. Maybe we can include it in a future course and delve into more details. But I thought spending time more on Nextflow and SnakeMake might be what we need. Also, something that Dana picked up, it's things like Slum and how to integrate your workflows, how to prioritize your jobs. If you're working within a HPC environment, running these workflows can speed up a lot if you got multiple calls. And you can write jobs that take advantage of those calls. But what you notice also is that particular tools, not all of them are able to do parallel processing, right? Particularly some of the tools that are legacy written in C, are difficult. There are ways to get around that, like using OpenMPI, maybe running multiple jobs, literally just splitting your jobs and having multiple instances of those jobs. Those are just ways that you can get around. If you got a system administrator, they may have Slum. That makes it really easy to work on a HPC environment and run batch jobs and run jobs depending on the resources that they require. You realize that certain computing tasks are more intensive on the CPU. Others require a lot more memory, and others are sort of urgent, immediate. We need results today. Others, this is just something we want to run in the background. We don't mind if we get results next week, and therefore the resource allocations made by system administrators, by informaticians, will depend on what type of job. And I think over time we'll either get to that or maybe get to another workshop that emphasizes those aspects, but maybe it's something that we can also discuss in the future. And talking of the future is now. So this is something we just covered up because we had actually thought about, how do you code using artificial intelligence assisted learning, using things like GitHub Copilot and Chat GPT. But Chat GPT is rather interesting, and as we were doing this, Phil and I started running tests and sort of interesting things, and we just got really surprised and mesmerized by the results that this chat box was able to give us. And this is no means comprehensive. So I don't know how many of us have heard about Chat GPT. It's oh, there we go. How everybody's done it. So who used Chat GPT in their assignments? All right. Okay. So a couple of you actually used Chat GPT in their work. So it is quite fascinating, and I think we can't ignore it. And there's a lot of discussions, ethical discussions about its role. It's definitely going to be transformative. I think we're going to see more of these sort of bots coming up. So ChatGPT is a language model, really, generative pre-trained transformer, which I guess is a natural language processing model. That's what it stands for. And it's basically an artificial intelligence-based generator. That is created to create linguistically, sorry, misspelled that, text that is similar to human writing. It can mimic human writing, but also it can understand the complexities of human language and pull up particular features of the human language. I think as of version 3.5 or 3 it was trained on over 45 terabytes of text data. And it offers this contextual understanding of this data, and it can pull things that are related in a much more deeper, meaningful way that, one, how quickly it can go through the text, much faster than what humans can do, and therefore quite intriguing. Multiple use cases, as you can imagine, for natural language processing. And I think we're going to see more and more of its utility. We're going to have all these ethical issues, questions, dilemmas. How we teach, I think, is going to really transform how teaching is done, and how language systems make use of it, or how they evolve. It's API based. Essentially means that it can, you can ask questions in a standard way and interact with it depending on context, right? So that's just a figure that I borrowed from this website here, which I thought summarizes exactly what I've just said. Generative transformer, based on large-scale data training, offers contextual understanding. API-based, you can plug into to this bot or to this system and answer specific questions. I've seen some really nice implementations of R coding, making slides, like all sort of things. So it's going to change the way we interact with these systems, in particular with the internet. Multiple use cases, and it now has quite a lot of application in coding, as I'm going to illustrate. So, being an AI, I did an experiment. Of course, I wanted to highlight some of the limitations, and I'm just pulling this from our OpenAI website. So there may be things that are incorrect. There are tweaks you may have to make, and there are certain things people might make use of, and therefore not everything may be very clear. As maybe I don't know, I'll illustrate. That human domain knowledge is still at least very applicable. You can throw a problem at this thing and expect it's going to solve it. But I think the key thing is to know how to interact with it and how to get from 0 to 30 or 0 to 80, depending. So I took a question. Sorry. As I was playing here, I took the question that we got from the one of the teams, and I went through what I would have expected one of these teams to do. And the first thing when you get a new paper is to summarize this paper. Practically what I'll do, I'll read the abstract, I'll read the methods, and then I'll go back to the results, and then I'll read the discussion last. That's how I read papers. And so I asked it, could you summarize this paper? And I gave it the DOI. Okay. And interestingly, it came up with quite really nice summary. In about 5 paragraphs, it was able to tell me what this paper is about. Okay, the 5 key things the paper is all about. Okay. And the next thing I asked it is about bioinformatics work. I asked it what bioinformatics tools were used in this paper and analysis. Okay, so maybe I don't know how many use Chat GPT to ask their question to make the work easier. Yeah, and Chat GPT gave me an outline of all the tools, at least that and was able to summarize not just the name of the tool, but also a brief description of what that tool does. And now I know what tools were used. I mean, I could just start from there and re-implement the workflow if I understand what this paper was about. But I went a step further. Okay, over here, it's just trying to describe a lot more. I will not read all the text. And I asked it, how would you set up a reanalysis of the bioinformatics analysis using Docker and Nextflow? Okay, so we're getting there, right? And this chat box was very happy to answer that question, and it actually outlined correctly what it will do. So it says that Docker setup, install Docker on the local computer server, workflow will be executed, and then it goes on to describe what that is. Nextflow, install Nextflow on the local computer or server where the work is executed. Then create a new directory, create a configuration for the workflow, and so on and so forth. Create a Docker file, create a Nextflow script, test the workflow, run the workflow. And that's the standard things as a bioinformatician you do. So definitely it's pulling this from texts, from things on the internet where people have described, but it's able to contextualize that and summarize. And therefore, I was like, okay, we're getting somewhere. And I asked it, how would you reanalyze the work in this paper using Docker and Nextflow? And then I think it's the same question, yeah. Create a Docker file, and you can see now, I was not satisfied with that answer. I've just had to regenerate, and now it's starting to give me a lot more details about what tools should be installed in the Docker file. And we go on, and then I ask, could you give me specific samples of the code to carry out the steps above? Okay, so I'm interacting with this bot, and it's going to do exactly that. Okay, so it's writing for me the script and how to run it, and then it's going to write for me a Docker file that I've asked it to, it's doing exactly what I would expect, but there is a mistake. Who can see it? There's a problem with this Docker file as illustrated here. Yeah, we got multiple run. So you're going to have lots of layers. That's a bad practice. Okay? So I wouldn't take that off, off the shelf. I would be careful about that. But it goes on to execute the workflow. And then I tell it, could you write a more specific or comprehensive code needed for the Nextflow step? Okay? And it went on to write for me the entire Nextflow code that I would need to execute this script. Okay. So, as a domain expert, that can get me running much quicker, much faster, give quicker feedback, but it's not going to replace me, I think, at this point. Not so sure what the next version will be, but it can get me running very quickly, all right? But for someone who is really naive, doesn't know about Nextflows and workflows, interacting with it, asking the right questions, understanding the context, may be a little bit of a challenge, and therefore it's not going to do the job. But I was actually amazed about how quick, how efficient, and all this took less than 10 minutes to get started. So I wanted to illustrate that example, and I think Phil might have a couple more examples.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I just thought we could do a few. We'll do a few of the exercises that you guys have been working on over the last couple of days, and just kind of see that, what happens when we can kind of use these AI bots in a kind of informed way. I don't think that you can take someone who doesn't know anything about bioinformatics. They can't become a bioinformatician using this, because you have to ask the right questions, right? So, because the right questions might be, for example, write me, what were you guys doing in the snake-make tutorial this time? Or, what might be like a snake-make tutorial, a snake-make workflow that many people want to use when they get home. So maybe something like, so we ask it to write us a snake-make workflow to trim the fast queues and assemble bacterial genomes. Okay, so here's it. It's coming through. It's defining everything, all the input files we're going to need. Okay, here's our first rule to trim the fast queue. with our input, output, and our shell command, it's choosing one particular tool, Trimmomatic, very commonly used. Second rule, spades assembly, input, output, shell with the spades, command with careful, only assembler, -T, number of threads. Another rule to combine the contigs, and then even this OR rule. I thought I had missed that actually, but normally that's actually needs to be at the start of the file. So that's one thing that you can't trust this thing entirely, right? But how much time did we just save, right? Like rather than be like, ooh, what should I do? Like, oh, where do I start? It's like a huge leg up, and you still need to engage with it and use like the critical, use your kind of critical faculties. But yeah, it's like a huge time saver. Yeah, so the advanced guys, so you were doing BioPython, so we just ask, I always think it's funny that people who use please with it, it's like, it's an AI, right? You don't need to be polite, but still say please, which is very revealing about how nice they are. I don't do that. But so maybe when the machines rise up, I'll be. Whoops.
Oh, that's interesting. Can I see what is done? I'm sorry. Could you please clarify what you mean by write me as? Do you mean a script form?
Yeah,
it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's much more than what Word autocorrect can do, is it?
What's on the Plus version?
What's that?
Premium version.
What's on the Plus version?
The premium version is the new
so I asked it to write a Python script to blast some sequences against the reference using Python, which was the exercise that you guys were doing the other day.
Much faster.
And so, in 10 seconds, it's doing all the imports, it's, setting the reference file, reading it in with sec.io, query file. Okay, so now it's using this www, which we were saying that we didn't want to use. So now we say, okay, try again with local class.
It gives you an example of a table. You see, this is a table.
So now it's imported the different NCBI class N command, and now it's running this one instead of the NCBI class www NCBI class. Right? If you do not think this is the most incredible thing you've ever seen, then I want to know what else you've seen. This is. It changes everything basically, but it's not the whole answer, right? We still need, in fact, maybe software engineering practices are going to become even more important, good practices, but it just make you so much more productive. It can really help people like you guys, because this is essentially, it's reading in tutorials and how-tos and everything from the internet, and it's providing you exactly the one that you need to get that thing done. And then you obviously still need to read the code and engage with it and make sure that everything is as expected. But it's just that gets rid of that stage of kind of, oh, I don't know what to do, I've got a blank sheet of paper, where do I start? This is a really good place to start. So we're very excited about this. Yeah, so I think some of you have accounts, so feel free to have a play around. So this is basically just, we don't have any other content or materials until 3 o'clock.
Questions?
Yeah. Sorry.
So what are your thoughts on how it will impact? What are your thoughts on how it will impact originality and just because I think.
So I'm not sure that
only work with
if you give someone your code and they say, how original, doesn't usually mean that's a good thing.
I don't know.
But it doesn't replace creativity.
Like opening up new frontiers.
Yeah. So I mean, my take on it will be, well, I can get this like boilerplate stuff that doesn't take any creativity done in a tenth of the time, and I can spend more time doing the things that only humans can do.
So I had the same question. Basically, what I did, I asked free Chat GPT the same question, and it didn't provide the same answer. So a different answer every time.
Yeah.
Or it's basically the same thing, but phrased differently. So you want it more.
Yeah, so it's not deterministic, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't it's not same input gives you the same output. It's like much more complicated. So and there's a little bit of like noise in there, I think deliberately to give that's where the whatever creativity it has comes from having a little bit of noise in the system. There's a really good I understood a little bit of it. There's an explainer by a famous mathematician called Stephen Wolfram who explains how it's working on the back end, which I'll post in the Slack group for anyone who is interested. But yeah, needless to say, it's pretty complicated.
Okay, so I think it's the same question that you asked, but phrased slightly differently. Do you see any ethical concerns that can arise from this?
Yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, if you used it to write code, do you have to acknowledge? Where do you have to acknowledge that? Do you acknowledge it in a paper? Do you acknowledge? Do you put it in the acknowledgements, or do you write it in the code? Yeah, I'm not sure what the norms are.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's new, so I'm not sure there's an
There's
established norm.
there's a lot of discussion about it, its role, and even now I think there are even calls to halt this sort of research because you got Chat GPT, and I don't know whether you're a fan of other AI technologies like Boston Dynamics. I'm just imagining now hooking Boston Dynamics with Chat GPT. The dog in particular, it can do quite a lot. But in the human, so on the human frontier, I think there's a lot of discussions we're going to see shaped by not just ChatGPT, but you're going to have loads of these sort of language models. I think it's one of the best examples that has come up, and I think particularly for young bioinformaticians, it's time to start. This is going to affect the future more than anyone, and I think in the next 1 year, as the technology gets more and more assimilated, gets even better, there'll be loads of discussions, and I think one such discussion is what does bioinformatics look like in the future? In past 2023, and what if you've been in the field long enough, there are usually leaps and changes. So, for example, if you ever did anything before the pyrosequencing, how we did bioinformatics was very different. We had the rise of the bio languages. Almost all of them have died, other than BioPython. And then came time for Illumina sequencing, pyrosequencing. And we saw the rise of Tuxedo Suite, QC, Primatree, rally assembly, variant callers, BAM alignment. And now the machines are giving much better output. You actually often don't need to do a QC, right? And now I can imagine that ChatGPT will get integrated in the machines, and the solutions of the future from your sequencer might be entire output of your graphs. And everything. So you got to ask yourself again, what will be how will you interface with that system? And now we also have decentralized sequencing quite a lot. I don't know who I was speaking to, but I did mention and say that sequencing and the sequencer is just like a PCL machine. It's another equipment that you need in a microbiology laboratory. You're not going to have sequencing centers, as it were. Okay. So just thinking beyond that, and how you, because to me, moving forward, I think a lot of you gonna shape that future, particularly in Africa, in low resource settings, and in collaboration with other people across the world. How will that future look like? How do we tackle the next frontier? You know, yeah.
Okay, so sorry again. A follow-up question to that. So here you can make right, you can as well tell it to write a methodology section of the application, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So question then is, how far can you go before you actually say that what's the line in terms of ethics?
I don't know. It's a game changer. It's new. I don't know how that discourse will be shaped. Just tell it to do it and then
Okay, more, let me rephrase that.
yes.
If I was to send you a paper
Yeah.
as a reviewer,
Yeah.
and that,
How do I
that
know
would-
that Chat GPT generated?
I can't even tell you that.
I don't-
ChatGPT.
You may have to.
What would be your response?
I don't know.
I've done this part with ChatGPT.
Good. Well done. Like, congratulations. Welcome
Yeah,
to the
well
future.
done. Your acceptance to nature.
Like, it's like, well, oh, I wrote this on a word processor, like, rather than writing it by hand. Like, what's the, like, why? It's just a good tool to, like,
Yeah.
make people more productive. I, but why? It's like, we're referencing, so it's like, so that there's like credit given for ideas, right?
Yeah.
And well, if you give it the prompt and you get an idea and it's interesting enough to be in a paper, then it's your idea.
Yes.
You don't have to like, there's still some creativity.
Let me try something now that is just given that. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna try something.
Yes, so there's been cases where students wrote all.
Okay, so I think schools, like exams, is going to change hugely. And obviously, it's cheating if you write your essay for your school with AI. Like, right? That is cheating. Because you're doing, it's like a test. But frankly, if in a year schools are still assessing things in a way that can be gained by AI, then the problem is with the school. Like, they're going to need to change how they do it.
So then perhaps you could say that as long as I'm sure my data is real, the analysis is okay. How I get to the solution, how I get that, how I get that thesis.
Yeah. Yeah, in the same way that you use a BioPython library, like,
So just to touch on that point, the founder Elon Musk, when he basically opened the OpenAI company before they developed this Chat GPT, there were some issues which you discussed, right? So, for example, if you were to do a master's or PhD at a university, there is some line of plagiarism that you cannot cross, and if you cross that line, your dissertation will get thrown out. Then obviously for publications, that's more or less the same. So it's very difficult for us as human beings to judge that line. I mean, you saw with Fatima's presentation, right? Different people have different agendas, different point of view, and my ethical judgment is very different from your ethical judgment. So there are coders that's developing a sort of almost an anti-Chat GPT code, so that when you plug your paper in, it can tell you 30% of this was written by ChatGPT and 70% was written by people. I mean, so if you want to make money, there's a big avenue.
So I should just clarify. I'm getting a little bit excited. So I clarify that if you are using it to write an introduction, then you still need to follow scientific norms of like referencing all the facts in your your introduction. If you're using it to actually like write sections of a scientific paper, probably, and I think it's not quite there yet, really.
No, that's not very specific.
But like,
Your
still,
field is a niche
yeah.
field. This won't be able to assist you.
I mean, you can submit something and you can ask her to do spelling checks, grammar checks. I don't think that's cheating.
But there are some people publish.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And this is from GPT.
I mean, there was lots of papers that's been published and has to be withdrawn because they fake their data. I mean, this is nothing compared to that.
So I think the thing is to know that these tools are there. They're gonna shape the next frontier. We will interact with them. They're going to be even more powerful ones. And I think in some instances, you're going to see a lot of job losses, maybe middle technical level expertise. So again, it's to think your role and how you know, how do you fit in that future. And I don't know, I mean, you know, what the next, I just can't say how it will look like in 2024 December. I just don't know. There will be lots of feedback from different players, and that discourse is going to, you know, shape it. But what I know about bioinformatics and a lot of technical fields, we tend to assimilate new technology, have it shape new tools. I don't know to what extent now, you know, you can rewrite some of these tools, give the source code, ask Chat GPT to optimize, recompile that tool, and take forward. But as I'm talking like that, you can already see that there is a level of technical expertise that is required. You know, so I think sort of low-level expertise may not be that important, but then to really understand the nitty-gritties will be crucial for human intervention. Right. So we thought we could discuss about that. And there's GitHub Copilot that can also help you in your code writing and correct your code, help you, assist you, and yeah, we gonna see how the future looks like.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah. Yes, yes.
Yeah, I like to think that kind of the two parts here that seem confusing to me, or are confusing, in the sense that you ask a question which can take an infinite number of forms. How about the answer? When you get the answer, you try like copy that answer and ask Google, based on Google and search. The point is that these things are trained on information that is already available. And so as of now, they won't synthesize anything new that has not been before. And in fact, up to the point where the particular version you're using has been trained, it cannot give you information, or it may not synthesize information that is beyond the point of the data that was used to train it. So there is an aspect of the question you can set it the way you want, ask it the way you want, but somehow the answer is limited to the amount of information or knowledge that is known at that particular point.
So, I mean, my response to that would be, you know, so essentially your complaint is that it only has all of human knowledge from here to like the very distant past, and it doesn't have this bit of human knowledge. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying that there is contextualizing it so that there is an understanding of what really its capabilities are, I would say.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, so with AI, there's essentially two streams. There's a top-down view and a bottom-up view. So all current AI is based on one of those two systems. So in the top-down view, you essentially have a set of rules, and the AI must follow that set of rules. And when there's an anomaly or outlier, you add a new rule, blah, blah, blah. So the AI grows based on the rules you have. The other option, which is more sort of machine learning, is bottom up. So you give AI a set of data, or the more data you have, the better it is actually. So you can say, here's 1,000 pictures of a chair, and the AI would know those pictures of the chair. And then years later, you upload 10,000 pictures of chairs, and then the AI will have more data. So it's the same thing with COVID, right? When it first occurred, there was hardly no data. But then there was a whole lot of data, so we could learn and develop faster and faster, understand it better. Same thing with AI. If you go bottom up, the more data it generates, the more information it gathers, the better it will become. Is that good? Great.
Thank you. Right, yeah, so yeah, thank you very much. So that sort of concludes our learning session, our lectures. So just Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe. And do you know? I don't know how many of us have filled the course review
Yeah,
question.
I got a lot.
If you not, please could you spend this time in 3:30 to go through that? Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting you, George. We would like the bus to leave at 3:15, so we want to start getting down before 3:15.
Yeah. So I was just about to give the floor to Kirsty and Johnny. And
sorry, I'm
any
just
final
parts. Please ignore me.
Yes.
final remarks, logistics, anything.
Yeah, so I think firstly it's been a really great week. A lot of new faces this year. I hope that the course has really given you a different perspective, new knowledge, new platforms, and new friendships that you have made that could potentially grow into collaborators. I mean, last year when we were here was end of April. Chat GPT wasn't even a thing. It just shows how fast technology are growing, and developed countries like America and Europe are not going to wait for these developing countries to catch up. So you as scientists, you have the platform, you have the skill set to obviously better yourself, and that in turn betters the entire community. And if you remember from Fatima's presentation, there's a lot of issues, and from the role-playing game you've seen that there's a lot of conflict and different layers of complexity. But as you grow and as you develop more and more skill acquisitions, you're able to make better judgment and better decisions. So with that, I think let's thank our trainers, George, Phil, Bals, and John for really assisting us this week. And we want to thank Henry for hosting us and all of you for being here. I know it's a lot to take in, a lot to absorb, but we have all the recordings, we have the tutorials, we will upload them onto the website that Percival is busy with, so that you guys can have this at a later stage in time, and then you can obviously come back and review the work. Are there any comments from any of you? Questions, queries? Nothing? Okay, great. Oh yes, go ahead.